On this edition of the podcast, I give you my final predictions for the off-year elections. Virginia, New Jersey, Prop 50, and New York. Also, we are joined by Austin Padgett to talk all things Argentina and Javier Milei. Big win for him and the shutdown. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock carries on. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Welcome, everybody, to the Politics program for October 29th, 2025. Your old pal, Justin Robert Young, joining you here from Austin, Texas. Spooky, scary skeletons are crawling through your face. I don't know how that song goes, but we do know it's Halloween week, so everybody's got their fake spider webs up, and we have actual elections that had millions of dollars spent on them to predict. And I will make my predictions in just a second. We're also going to get into the PU's stinky shutdown that only continues to really become ever more odiferous by the second. A lot of stories about how things that normally work now all of a sudden don't have money, up to and including the Dropbox accounts of congressional leaders, which are needing to be covered by private funds as we speak. That's a real story that's happening on Capitol Hill. Oh, by the way, also, nobody is going to have sympathy for them, except for me, because you know who loves you. The congressional staff isn't getting paid at all right now. They're doing it for the love of the game and because theoretically, eventually they'll get paid back. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Donald Trump in Asia. We'll talk about the ceasefire in Gaza, done, teetering, depending on how you look at it. Netanyahu ordering strikes into Gaza. And then, of course, Austin Padgett makes his PX3 debut, one of the loudest voices in the libertarian world, somebody who I very much enjoy talking to outside of the media ecosystem. He's going to be on because he spends a lot of time talking about Argentina, and Argentina's at a bit of an inflection point, and a positive one, if you are of the libertarian persuasion. So we'll give him a chance to take a bit of a victory lap. But we begin with what is really the bread and butter of this show, elections. It's what I like. It's what I prefer to talk about. And guys, we're about out of it. We're about out of my least favorite year on our 4-year lunar calendar. 4 years ago, this year almost made me quit the podcast entirely because I could not stand to talk about the Biden legislative push. This year, a lot more to talk about. Trump 2.0 has not lacked for topics. They have just lacked for topics that I particularly naturally find interesting. And that is, of course, elections and the issues that shape them, the stratagem that wins them. And next Tuesday, we're going to have the results of actual elections. Now, getting excited about off-year elections is kind of like getting excited for preseason football. And let me just tell you guys right now, you're looking at a men who bet on preseason football, so you know I'm excited about this. Let's roll into it. California, Prop 50, Gavin Newsom's big push to counter the Republican redrawing of maps. He says, to the independent commission that California has in place. I want 5 more seats for the Democrats when it comes to the National House of Representatives. We looked at this one early on and said the polling was interesting because the verbiage of the polling told you a lot about how this was going to go. It was really a messaging battle. Who could define this proposition the fastest and the most completely? The Democrats and Gavin Newsom tried a few different versions, but it eventually landed on protecting America against Donald Trump. This is about fighting back. We are not doing anything aggressive. We are being defensive. This is just a way to keep the playing field even because of overreaches by Texas. Boo. Trump. Boo. The only hope that the other side had was that they were able to tie this around the independent commission. The independent commission is being taken away for the sake of gridlocked one-party government, and it will never come back. They are going to take it away and it will be gone forever. We have one opportunity to maintain our ability to have these districts drawn in a way that we understand is fair. And if we give it away, it's never going to come back. Now, there's some behind the scenes drama on this. Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, said he was going to raise like $100 million for this proposition. They've spent single digits as of press time. So we don't know whether or not that was just a lie, whether or not he had money and the money went away. Did the money get spent in a different way that wasn't doing what it was supposed to do? Here's what didn't happen. Gavin Newsom or his team fumbling the ball. This is going to be, I'm going to guess, about a 10 to 11 point victory for Prop 50. And when it happens, it will be a big, big, big win for Gavin Newsom. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is a huge take charge, do something moment for a base, a Democratic base that is desperate for people to do something. Gavin Newsom's going to come out of this looking like a take charge leader who understood the assignment and aced it. 2028 reverberations, obviously, afterward, but I have no reason to believe that this is going to be anything other than an absolute boat race, 10 to 15 points or up by the time that all the votes are counted. And since it's California, we can hopefully assume that'll be sometime before Christmas. All right. Let's move on over to Virginia. I want to save the closest and most important race for last here. Virginia, the governor, Winsome Earl Sears versus Abigail Spanberger. I'm going up to Virginia on Saturday. Well, DC. I'm going up to DC. And initially, I was like, okay, this is going to be exactly like 4 years ago when I went up. It's Terry McAuliffe versus Glenn Youngkin. I'm going to rent my car. I'm going to assume I'm going to be in 2 or 3 different places throughout Virginia because I'm going to be driving, trying to make each different event. You know, last time I had to go down to Richmond, I saw a McAuliffe event, and then I came back up to Nova, and I saw a Youngkin event. Winsome Earl Sears doesn't have events. They're hiding this woman. And it's because she is not somebody that they want a lot of tape out of. Meanwhile, Abigail Spanberger has not reacted great post Jay Jones, and we're going to get to him in a second because that's a closer race. But still, when you look at this polling, October 1st was when the J. Jones scandal broke. You saw the closest that it got was a Trafalgar Insider Advantage poll, Spanberger up 3. It was a pretty beefy sample size, 1,039 likely voters. That essentially puts it in the margin of error. But since then, everything has reverted to the norm. Spanberger up by 12, 9, 7. Her RCP average is 7.1. If Winsome Merle Sears was a more compelling candidate, I believe she would be in a closer race right now. But there are headwinds here that are really, really hard for any Republican to overcome. Number one, this is just the streak that happens in Virginia. Who's ever in the White House, the opposite party usually wins the governorship of Virginia. It's hard to build equity in a state where you're only allowed to serve one term. You can't do 2 consecutive terms, so you constantly are turning people over. There's no such thing as an incumbency advantage in Virginia. And despite the fact that I don't think that Spanberger has a particularly high talent when it comes to politics, I don't think that she's reacted great under crisis. She hasn't made the mistakes that McAuliffe did. McAuliffe was asleep at the wheel on the issue that wound up turning the tide. Spanberger has been a lot more reactive to that. She hasn't been caught under the transgender cloud that obviously McAuliffe did. That was a bit of a different time 4 years ago, but still, I don't see any reason that this is going to be a win for Winsome Earl Sears. This is my expectation. A win for her would be a loss under 5 points. But even then, I don't know exactly what to read into it because you have this J. Jones thing, kind of ties into the violence of the moment. Also, how do we figure the Doge into all of this? Let's remember that earlier this year, a lot of federal employees were fired. Where do you think these federal employees live? Old Virginia. That's where. The more interesting, so I'm going to say my official prediction here is Spanberger by, you want to know what? I'm going to say 8. Spanberger by 8. I'm going to go over on the RCP average. Here's the closer race. That is Miyares versus J. Jones. This race flipped in a major way after the scandal that erupted around J. Jones's DUI, number 1, which he went very, very fast over the speed limit, then wound up doing half of his community service for his own super PAC. Not a great look. Even less of a great look, published text message where he talked about shooting a rival politician, a Speaker of the House, saying that the guy's kid should die in his arms because it might make him more prone to gun control legislation. Ugly, ugly stuff that showed bad judgment any which way you slice it. And J. Jones has not led in a public poll since. Miyares up by as much as 7 and as little as 1. There was one tie in a Washington Post poll. That was the middle of October. Other than that, a pretty consistent lead. It is an RCP average of 3.3. Nate Silver Bulletin, Substack. Interesting piece saying, hey, don't count J. Jones out of this. Ticket splitting is rarer these days. Early voting was already going when the J. Jones stuff broke. A lot of early voting in Virginia. Jeez Louise, if it was happening before October. What do we have? 3 months of early voting out there? Anyway, my bet is Miyares. Close. Miyares by a point. So I do think this is going to be closer than people think. I do think it's going to be closer than people think. All right, let's go to a race another one that I thought I was going to be there for. I'm not going to be there for any races. I'm literally going to be going to DC for the shutdown now, because that's the thing I'm most interested in, is to just get the vibe of DC when it comes to the shutdown, because it's starting to stink up the joint. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But another place that I thought I would be is the Big Apple, the sunny windswept hamlet of New York City. And this one, friends, is a laugher. Get ready for Mayor Zohran Kwame Mamdani. It's done. He has not been under in a public poll here. I'm just taking a look by 10. You know, I guess if you really want to huff any kind of Andrew Cuomo quopium, you would be looking at the idea that Mamdani's lead has closed. Sliwa, who is the Republican in this race, he has shrunk as things have gotten closer to Election Day, because there is a sense that if you are a Republican voter, this might be the hardest that you've ever held your nose, because you hate Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was a villain to you through COVID. You are happy to see his political career destroyed. And yet now, well, strange bedfellows. But there he is. Last public poll here is a Suffolk poll, 500 likely voters, 4.4% margin of error, has Mamdani at 44, Cuomo at 34. That is a good poll for Cuomo, has Sliwa at 11. That is below his RCP average by 5. But, you know, let's say that tightens even further. I still think it's going to be impossible to beat Mamdani. And I'll put it this way. If Mamdani does lose, this is going to be a Joker-fication moment for all of Brooklyn. The Brooklyn hipsters are going to freak out. I don't think that's going to happen. Mamdani wins. I'm going to say it's over 10. I'm going to say that Mamdani wins by 13 points in New York. And the Zillow listings for Palm Beach, Florida, get ready. Get ready. Zillow's going to have to add those like OpenAI server farms just to handle the traffic of New York City to Florida, because the people that don't like Mamdani, whoa, might be time to hit the old ejector button. Now here's my race of the night. One of my old stomping grounds, New Jersey. Proud former Hoboken resident, and I have nothing but love for the Garden State. And this is the question that I want to ask everybody. Whither the Garden State? Because right now we have a proxy war. Mikey Sherrill, Jack Ciccarelli. I don't know if his name is really Ciccarelli or Chitterelli. I just feel like whatever Goomba I have in me wants to say Ciccarelli. Hey, Ciccarelli. Now, this race has been interesting. You had it tighten a little bit at the beginning of the month, and it got a lot of people in the Democratic Party really, really, really scared. You had a tied race on a Hill Emerson poll back in late September. But then past that, through the bulk of October, things reverted back to their mean. Sherrill up 3, Sherrill up 5, Sherrill up 7. And then in the last 2 weeks, you have seen this thing tighten yet again. A Trafalgar Insider Advantage poll has Sherrill up 1. A coefficient poll has Sherrill up 1, well within the margin of error. And a Qantas Insights poll has Sherrill up 3, also within the margin of error. Early voting in New Jersey has been softer than some Democrats have wanted. I am not bold enough to call this one for Ciccarelli. But I am bold enough to say this. If you are a Republican, you are very excited if this ends under 3. If this is under 3, then what is being said is that New Jersey is now at bare minimum a fringe battleground state and quite possibly an actual battleground state. That the new MAGA coalition is white, working class, and minority friendly enough that you can compete in New Jersey. Now, what do I mean by fringe battleground state? A fringe battleground state to me is New Mexico, Virginia. So they are adjacent to places that are for real battleground states. New Mexico adjacent to Arizona, New Jersey adjacent to Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And if things are going really, 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 really well, then they're in play. But you are able to, at least, if you spend money in that state, plausibly, your opponent who believes they should win it needs to spend more money there. So you can deplete their war chest by spending a little bit of money because they're going to have to match it because they don't want to be losing on the airwaves in a state that they believe that they should win. So these are I believe that Democrats should treat Florida like a real battleground state, that they should actually invest in the state. Anyway, long story short, right now for their map in a presidential year, it's a fringe battleground state, meaning if things are going great, they can pour a little bit of money, make Republicans spend more money there. That's what I believe New Jersey could for real be in the next cycle. And this is probably going to be the biggest sign as to whether or not it can happen. Republicans are bullish. Ciccarelli came close last time, 4 years ago. He's closed strong. Mickey Sherrill has not closed strong. New Jersey has elected Republican governors in the past. And I don't have the Bubba loans. I don't have the Bubba loans to say Ciccarelli. But I do think it's going to end within 3. I'm going to say Mikey Sherrill by 2. And those are my predictions. Lock them down. Leading it to the off year elections. Let's go. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Thank you to everybody who supports this show. You are the reason why I'm able to go and travel and see the sights. I am going to dip myself into the world of the PU Stinky Shutdown that is happening right now in our nation's capital. We're presuming it's still going to be going on Saturday, but I don't know how much longer after Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to leave Wednesday, but it does mean that we're going to have a little time to get together. So if you are listening to this and you are in the Delmarva area, if you are in the DC metro, then myself and Andrew Heaton will be together. SATURDAY night. At the bar that we very much enjoy the most, and that is the Tune In on Capitol Hill. Come join us. It is going to be a fun time. Who knows who's going to be there? Who knows what congressional staffers will be there? We might be able to break some news right there. That's all going to happen Saturday night at 8 p.m. It's a little late, but I get in a little late. Look, it's me and Heaton getting together at the Tune In at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. God knows what's going to happen. Friends, God knows. President Donald Trump's administration in South Korea remain deadlocked over a key element of the tentative trade deal they want to ink during this Asian trip for President Trump. He is demanding that Seoul make a $300 billion upfront payment to the United States as part of an investment pledge, a move that South Korean officials warn could destabilize their economy and currency. Negotiators are debating whether funds would include loans or guarantees and how profits and projects would be managed. The United States has shown some flexibility, suggesting investments could be made in Korean currency, but visa and immigration issues for Korean workers in U.S. factories remain unresolved, following a controversial ICE raid in Georgia. South Korea seeks a longer payment timeline and more control over investment decisions, while the U.S. pressures for completion during this trip. They want deliverables. They want this thing to be boom, 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 boom when it comes to trade deals. That's very much where the Trump administration's head's at. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent admits that the deal won't be finalized this week as both sides struggle to reconcile political optics with economic practicality. I think they want some kind of framework, though. And my gut is I think they're going to get it. Donald Trump announcing trade deals and frameworks with Malaysia, Cambodia, goes up to Japan, has a very lovey-dovey photo op and press presentation with the brand new prime minister, the first female prime minister of Japan. And then Thursday, so tomorrow, if you were listening to this on Wednesday, we get to the big, big, big main event. The reason why Donald Trump is in the region, and that is an economic conference which will feature a face-to-face meeting with Chairman Xi, President Xi of China. Some happy sounds coming out of the pre-work that quite possibly there could be a multi-year deal that is inked between the two leaders that could bring peace to the chaos of the economic relationship between the United States and China. Obviously, we'll see. You guys know my point of view politically. This is a not for long situation between the United States and China because China is capricious about how they comply with some of these things. And we have a capricious president who will decide on his own timeline whether or not you are playing ball. And then there's this, some speculation on one of my favorite shows, the morning meeting on the two-way platform. Sean Spicer, our friend Dan Turrentine, who's been on this show, and Mark Halperin. The idea that maybe China would help isolate Russia. Now, that would do a lot to help end the war in Ukraine because right now, Russia sells its oil to China, but, that don't happen for free. China likes the idea of the United States being involved in things that they can take advantage of. So what would be the give back? Well, Mark Halperin says maybe there's an understanding. Donald Trump doesn't like war. The looming conflict is one in Taiwan. Maybe there's an understanding that, the U.S. isn't going to draw hard lines on some things. I would love to know whatever is being discussed. If anybody who's listening to this has any sense of it, please email me. Because I've got some suspicions, some general, totally ill-informed suspicions, right? These are worthless headcanon ideas. But because you guys are listening to my podcast, I'll share them. My sense is that China's not in a great economic position to go to war. but they have to. They have to do something that would reunify themselves with what they believe they've never lost, but functionally is apart from them, and that is Taiwan. So how do you square that circle? If you know that an economic fight with Donald Trump has thrown pretty significant wrenches into your gears, then like what happens when you totally shut off your relationship with the West because you are taking back Taiwan? Maybe there's another way, a negotiated way. Something you can do that would sell to your domestic audience that you have reasserted control over that meddlesome island, but still doesn't result in a global war. I don't know. Very, very interesting, though. That's the story that everyone's going to have their eyes on over the next 72 hours. Let's talk the stinky shutdown. The Senate failed for the 13th time on Tuesday to reopen the federal government with the shutdown now in its fourth week. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits are close to expiring at the end of the month, prompting calls for deals from unions and lawmakers. Senator Josh Hawley's bill to fund SNAP has support from 10 GOP senators, and Democrats may back a GOP proposal to pay all federal workers during the shutdown. The Democrats also offering another bill that would fund both SNAP and WIC, which is grocery assistance. The big news is that one of the unions, the federal workers unions that are aligned with the Democrats, broke ranks this week and officially said that the Democrats should just sign the clean CR. So you are beginning to see a fraying in the Democratic coalition. That is important. That matters. There's also polling that is coming out showing that this isn't really moving the needle in the direction that the Democrats want it to, i.e. Republicans are not being blamed in a major way. Now, Democrats aren't really being blamed in a gigantic way either, but we keep getting back to this idea. Like, I'm just going to give you guys the way I'm saying this right now, because it's very easy to get lost in the weeds. We're in a very desperate phase of gossip and messaging because everyone wants to think that this is micromanageable, and I don't believe that it is. Some things are incredibly steerable like an F1 car. Other things are not steerable. It's like a boat, right? You can move it just a little bit left or right, but otherwise it's going to go in the direction that it's going. And I do believe that when it comes to shutdowns, the deeper we get into the frustration and annoyance, the less the American public is looking for nuance. They don't care. You are going to start reaching and affecting people who don't care about politics at all. They're certainly not listening to me. They're not listening to any PR release from any congressman or senator. They are not reading any of the poster board that are behind Chuck Schumer or John Thune as they are speaking. They are not watching Mike Johnson's 10 a.m. press conference. They are not listening to Hakeem Jeffries. They are just pissed off that their flight is delayed because there was an air traffic controller absence-related ground stop. That's it. They are just humiliated because they are not able to get their assistance from SNAP. And when that happens, the blame that comes in is, number one, just on politicians and government, first and foremost. And then secondarily, if it does fall on a party, it's the party that's voting right now to keep the government closed. And right now, the party that is voting to keep the government closed is the Democratic Party. That's it. That's all. You can say, well, but they offered this thing and there's a bill and there's another bill and blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that it's going to matter. That's getting pissed off now. So I will say again, like I've said for a while, where do the Democrats settle on a win? Because the last thing that I've heard that makes sense is they're like, well, we're going to let November 1st come and go because that is when rate notices go out. The Obamacare registration window is open and the rate and the notices of what you will pay at the end of the year are going to be very high. And boy, when people see that, they're going to be pissed off. They're going to blame the Republicans. Well, the SNAP stuff runs out then too. So part of me thinks that you might see some movement by the time that we get to November 1st to avoid November 1st, but I don't think that that's the case. And here's the reason why. There's a yawning gap between elected Democrats in Washington, D.C. and their base. Meaning, I don't believe that they really understand each other. Democrats in D.C. understand that the base is frustrated. They understand that the base is despondent. They understand that the base is angry. But I don't believe that Chuck Schumer knows what would make the base happy or not mad that would end this shutdown. I don't think he knows. And so I think we're going to get to November 1st because to give up before November 1st would be looked at as getting right up until the point where you're going to do something real and then chickening out. But I'll tell you this, there are some people out here that are talking about how this is going to go toward November 20th. If you really think that a government shutdown that involves air traffic controllers is going to encroach upon Thanksgiving, one of the biggest travel days of the year here in the United States of America, you're psychotic. That is political suicide. And, you know, we got Gabe Fleischer coming on for Friday's episode. I got to ask the boy, is it time to send the memo to Pam Bondi? If they get close to Thanksgiving, I think it might be. Because this is Gabe Fleischer's opinion. That shutdowns are only in existence because of a ruling by the Attorney General and the Attorney General could just rule the other way. If we get that close, man. Whew. All right, one more foreign policy story. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered powerful strikes in Gaza after a firefight in Rafah where Israeli forces said Hamas militants attacked with anti-tank missiles and sniper fire. Hamas has denied involvement, accusing Israel of violating the fragile ceasefire brokered under President Trump's peace deal, once his administration's biggest diplomatic success. The incident escalates tensions around the return of deceased hostages, a central term of the ceasefire. Hamas has pledged the return of several bodies, but delayed after the strikes, warning that continued Israeli escalation would halt recovery efforts. Before the Rafah clash, Israel had shown the U.S. a drone video allegedly proving that Hamas faked body recovery operations. The White House and CIA dismissed it as non-material, urging restraint. Netanyahu, frustrated with what Israel calls Hamas's foot-dragging, sought Trump's approval for retaliation, but reportedly acted without direct coordination. The renewed strikes threatened to unravel the months of U.S.-brokered stability efforts, including a command center Washington set up in Israel to monitor the deal. Trump, who's currently traveling in Asia, as we'd mentioned, has recently warned that Hamas should return the hostages' remains quickly or face international consequences, with fighting reignited in Rafah and both sides trading blame. The already shaky ceasefire now risks total collapse. You know, there's that meme of James Franco in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the Netflix Coen Brothers movie, where he's on the platform of the gallows with the noose around his neck, and he looks at the guy next to him, and he kind of has this devil-may-care smile, and he goes, first time? One of my great frustrations over the last 2 years, reading and watching the reaction and how it has fundamentally reshaped American politics, that is, this current conflict between Israel and Hamas, is that you have a lot of people that are tuning into this issue for the first time in their lives. And you can tell by the kind of stories they react to. Stories that if you've paid attention to this conflict for any longer than that, you realize that there is a cyclical nature to a lot of this stuff. This is not a new conflict. And a lot of the different versions of it have followed very similar pattern structures. To which I would say, when I read, the fragile ceasefire teeters upon total collapse, my response to that is, so it's the Middle East. So it's Israel and the Palestinians. Israel and the Palestinians should just be called the fragile ceasefire teeters on total collapse. This is what happens in this region. It is a constant tinderbox. So what does this mean? Well, look, a few things are different today than they were a month ago, regardless of what you think about the durability of peace in the region. Number one, there are no more live hostages in Gaza from the Israeli side. There are remains that the Israelis take very, very seriously. But there are no live hostages, which means if they just want to go wreck stuff, they can go wreck stuff. Number two, you've got a few more people that are involved in this than were involved before. And what Donald Trump has said is that if Hamas violates this ceasefire, then they will be eliminated as a participant in any of this. They're supposed to slowly disarm and have safe passage out of Gaza should they want, but they will face a reckoning, but it's not going to be from the IDF. It's going to be from Arab countries. Arab countries that want to resettle Gaza under a Palestinian leadership that they approve of. Now, there's probably another 150 years of fighting, just even in that sentence that we have yet to unpack. But there are more factors in play here than there were before. So if you're just thinking, okay, well, we're just going to go back to the way that we were before that, the deal that got the hostages out, I think that phase is over. Even if violence continues, that phase is over. Obviously, Donald Trump does not want any eyes on anything other than a big deal with China. So I don't think that you're going to see a lot of reaction. They're going to hope that this is something that can be cauterized. But then again, Trump has never been one to only focus on one thing at a time. You know, everything can get it on Truth Social. Something to keep an eye on, though. That's your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you need to go if you want to get 2 bonus episodes of this show each and every week. Thank you to everybody who supports us. We are in renewal month. I believe that the vast majority of everybody who signed up at the earliest possible time when you got a free month last year, when I flipped over from Patreon, you were going to renew at the beginning of November. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to go out and do my best to do a little shoe leather reporting because you guys deserve it. And you give me the opportunity to do so. Thank you. Thank you for that. TakePoliticsSeriously.com if you want to be a part of it. It is my honor to welcome to the show Austin Padgett, host of the History 102 podcast. And I would say the social media laureate of libertarian and free market minded writings. At least for my money, I very much enjoy every time that you go ahead and let loose one of those big weighty diatribes on X, and it is always a great chat whenever we are in person. So welcome to the show officially, Austin.
Thank you. I try to keep them, not too long, but make sure I can include enough nuance to make everybody a little bit upset. So,
I'll tell you what, whenever you are in the fighting pits of X, there is only so much that you can do that is interesting, that isn't also upsetting. The reason why I wanted to bring you on is because you are probably the person in my social media diet that talks the most about Argentina. And that is because, coming from a libertarian perspective, I don't think that there is any other country or leadership of a country that has as much at stake for the worldview that you so eloquently talk about the most. And there seems to be an inflection point on a lot of different things here. So explain to folks who are not super up on this, what is happening in Argentina right now, and why is it good for their current leader, Javier Milei?
Yes. So, 10 years ago, or whatever, people would look at foreign destinations. They look at private cities. Are you going to take some land from this African country and establish a city like a Singapore? Is it going to be Uruguay? Is it going to be Chile? Where could there possibly be a flourishing of freedom outside of America, the original beacon of freedom, as we're so black-pilled and out of options, 10-year ago frame. I don't think anyone expected it to be Argentina, which was one of the most communist countries and consistently progressive countries in South America. Yes. I suppose there's there's a rational explanation when you see, when you get to the end of the line, they ran out of other people's money. So I guess it makes it easier to make a counter pitch at that point, which is why I immediately latched on to Argentina is so important. Because it's a lot easier to convince someone through empirical evidence than abstract values. That's why China adopted property rights. There's the famous expression from the leader at the time. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it was essentially, we do what works. Property rights is communism now, because communism works and property rights work. So the empirical example is important, and you have the values have largely been lost in the U.S. because we're at the tail end of progressive century, and so you have to teach them back to people, but that requires a lot of abstract concepts, and most of the population don't deal in abstract concepts. So the value of an empirical example through Javier Milei, an anarcho-capitalist libertarian, getting elected in Argentina to make transformative change is unlimited value, because that gives not only the population an example. Of course, you can't rely on just rational dialogue to convince everybody of everything, as people say, even though dialogue is still important. But it's not only that, the elites are looking at this, and there's a lot of influential people who have a good understanding of regulation in international markets who are saying, wow, okay, this is actually not theoretical. This is a real potential solution for the U.S.
So 2023 is when Milei begins his push for leadership, and, he's certainly a character. He puts himself into the larger than life category. He became famous in Argentina for many different reasons, but he certainly is good on television, and he has this very, very, at least for Argentina, radical position of how he is going to reshape the government, and he is going to tackle their hyperinflation by way of slashing government services. He wins. And I think, I was funny because for another podcast that I do, I was looking back at revisiting this from how we talked about it back in 2023. And there was a lot of conversation then about like, hey, this is a flash in the pan. South America is South America. You can only talk about taking things away from a population that expects it for so long. If you actually try to do it, the way that this normally goes is the rubber band snaps back, people get mad, there's violence in the streets, and next thing you know, you're kind of back to where you were in square one. And that brings us to now, where there was a midterm election a couple days ago. There was a lot of conversation on whether or not exactly the reforms that Milei put in would result in a snapback. And as it turns out, the opposite happened. Not only did his party hold their parliamentary footprint, but they expanded it. Why do you think that happened? And do you think that why do you think that it bucked the trend, considering to either foreign expectations or even just the reality of how things do normally go in South America?
A few reasons, because I also had people saying that to me, that, oh, it's South American politics. It only ever goes one way. But I know, Chile flipped around and was quite a free market for a while. And Milei was a unique leader, and that he wasn't just a libertarian. He wasn't a neoliberal. He was a long-term Misesian academic with infinite hours of radio interviews, intellectual papers, books. So this is someone who understands the opportunities very well. Not only that, but he took the radical pragmatic approach that I talk about, where a lot of people create a false dichotomy between unprincipled pragmatism and unworkable radicalism. Some people do kind of like a mushy middle of that, but I prefer to be 100% pragmatist and 100% radical, like 100% of both, because you don't have to lose
as
your North
much
Star.
as you can realistically within a radical playbook. Whatever you can do from the furthest point of your beliefs that can happen today, do that.
Right. And a lot of people see their beliefs as too far away, so they might give up on it, or they're so tied up in their beliefs that they don't know how to interface or actually take human action towards advancing them. So it's a very basic concept of when you hit a ravine on a hike for the North Star, then you just go around. You don't have to run into the wall or abandon the North Star. And Milei's good at that. And one of the things he was so good about, and which is why he avoided maybe some of the problems of Thatcher a little bit better, is that he deregulated very broadly, not just attract large investment or corporate flexibility without a more broader based deregulation. And he focused on that over austerity.
Gotcha.
So he didn't really target the key welfare. One of the ways he tamped down protests was by targeting welfare of protesters. That was the only people whose welfare he targeted. And so that's significant as an extreme libertarian. He's not just doing everything at once. He's picking strategically, and he leaned very heavily on deregulation because he understood the outsized impact that makes. And that's what enabled him to cut rent prices 30-40% within a few months of taking office. He was also able to bring inflation down to basically zero, and he's attracted a ridiculous amount of investment and entrepreneurship. And also, has had a very good relationship with Trump, which gets him preferential tariff access, because obviously we will get to that in a second. Yeah.
Yes, we will get to Trump endorsed candidate Javier Milei in a second in terms of the American
not to skip ahead.
The American connection to it. But let me just stay here for a second locally before we get to how the U.S. is involved. For folks who, again, are just kind of they're aware of this, but they want to know more of a little bit of the nitty gritty. You mentioned deregulation and inflation. What were other concrete things that he did out of a libertarian playbook over these last 2 years that he was judged by, or his party was judged by in these elections?
I don't know how it was judged necessarily by the Argentinian people, but I know another legislative policy angle that he focused very heavily on was decentralization, because Argentina has various states, provinces, just like the U.S. And so he's really trying to get the political authority and the solutions picked up on a more abstracted level, because that's what's going to prevent a bounce back if anything happens at the federal level.
Yeah.
Because it's already being run through a different means, so there's not as much of a demand for return.
One of the things that was very surprising to me as I was looking more into this today was that it really wasn't like the headline, if you look at this from a long enough timeline, wasn't necessarily even Milei's party staying in power, although going forward, that's probably the bigger story. It was the kind of collapse of the Peronist government that had been that progressive collectivist government that has existed in Argentina for so many years. And if anything, whether or not Milei is the leader or his party is the leader going forward, it does seem like the gas is running out of the tank of that era of Argentina. So that seems to me to be almost a bigger win, considering how much the Peronists have been the big bad for Milei. That's almost as big as anything else that he's done, is that he seems to have taken the air out of that political movement.
Right, kind of like Trump taking out the previous establishment as one of his most valuable things. I think both in the case of Trump and Milei, we're also really lucky that we have them in there on the positive end, the doing stuff end, because Milei is a really unique figure, and he really gets it, and he's targeting the correct areas. And so it's going to, if you think libertarian ideas work, then this is going to work. And that's what I thought when he got elected, and it's working out quite spectacularly in that fashion. And I don't think they didn't actually necessarily need the U.S. for, and it's not a loan. What happened was we gave them $20 billion in private investment. That was private investors. Right?
I heard this was a bailout. The United States bailed
I thought
out.
You were countering me for a second instead of being
no,
sarcastic.
No. They bailed them out. Yeah. So this is something that me and you were going back and forth with, because I was kind of blown away that the American political, and I saw this as much on the right as I did on the left. It was mostly criticized by either the anti-Trump left that wants to, there's no rhyme or reason to the things that they will latch on to say that Donald Trump is bad. It doesn't follow a lot of at least political ideological coherence, but really there was a lot of folks, including Marjorie Taylor Greene on the right, who was very critical of the idea that there was a $20 billion bailout to Argentina. And when I looked at it, and when I talked to you about it, it's like, well, it didn't seem complicated to look at the deal and say this was not a bailout. This was a stabilization of the Argentinian peso in a swap. So It was announced as a currency swap that they were going to buy $20 billion worth of pesos, Argentinian pesos, with the idea being either the peso goes up, you change it back to dollars, but now you have more dollars than you had before. So you made money on the interaction, and you've saved or you've entrenched a currency of an ally, or you hold on to the Argentinian peso because you think it might go up further, and then you eventually execute the swap later down the road. Why do you think that this was categorized as something other than what it was announced as?
Well, it's happened multiple times. The right very easily falls for leftist globalist agitprop. They know what makes us mad. And it's also gotten worse to the point where Milei's kind of been put on the opposite sides of some factional lines due to Israel. And so libertarians might jump on, or conservatives might jump on to those narratives just because it's like basic tribal oppositional politics lined up that way, even though obviously libertarians should be very excited and interested in Milei, and you should at least research a little bit before you spread agitprop. One was when Milei first got elected, everybody on the right was talking about how he paid for some transgender medication, and what he actually done, it was something that was paid for by the previous government, and he had just deleted that entire department. And so they found a receipt for like a past debt and blamed it on Milei because they paid the debt. and said he was doing trans stuff, right? Nothing of the sort. And I'll break down the beef one quickly because he's also getting criticism for the tariffs.
Yes.
It was portrayed as not America first. We're helping out Argentina, hurting American farmers, etc.
It is, and this is an ongoing thing. So this is still in flux, and I'll fill it in with some stuff I've heard from Capitol Hill after you're done explaining.
Cool.
But the headline was, or is currently, beef prices are high. This is a fact at the grocery store, and that's true for a lot of different reasons. But Donald Trump is going to stabilize beef prices by way of allowing more access from Argentinian beef.
Yeah.
What is true of that as you know it, or have explored it? What is untrue?
It's so bizarre on multiple levels because, first of all, lowering a tariff isn't like using some government policy to give preferential access. Well, it's preferential access related, but it's you're reducing. We're not creating a regulation mandating that people buy Argentinian beef. Second, tariffs in general on foreign beef have gone way up. Tariffs on, there's the 25% baseline for beef. Brazil has a plus 50. And so there's 75% tariffs from Brazil. That's way more, right? So if we're talking about the overall, and we import more from Brazil. So if we're talking about the overall flooding the U.S. with market with beef narrative, that's all already false. Second, what we're doing is we're getting rid of the 25% tariff on Argentina. But it's only up to 80,000 metric tons. Currently, they sell around 20,000 tons. Argentina is 2% of U.S. beef imports. So that's likely to double, probably. The cap would be around 8% for the preferential tariff. But Argentina also has supply constraints. So it's probably not going to go up more from 2% of imports to 4% of imports. That's cutting directly into Brazilian exports, not American farmers. And we also need livestock.
This makes it more likely that we would buy, if you are buying foreign beef from South America, from a known beef exporting country in South America, you are now more likely to buy it from neighboring Argentina than from Brazil, because it is cheaper to buy from Argentina than it is from Brazil.
And I don't know, Brazil might still have more total exports because they have a bigger
economy, yeah.
And they've been really gearing up their beef and dairy industry. It's been professionalizing quite a lot because Europe has basically regulated itself out of the industry. So they're setting up Brazil as their dairy supplier.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like, we're not flooding the market with beef. It's just lowering a tariff. It has a cap. So that's a big exaggerated narrative. And then we can get into the other one.
What I will tell you is, on Capitol Hill, people got beef, my friend. It is. I have heard more anger from Republican sources on Capitol Hill that are breaking with the administration on this than I heard on tariffs, on exploding the boats off of Venezuela or anything like that. Name a thing that you would imagine that Republicans would be mad at the Trump administration for. It has paled in comparison when it comes to this. And their argument is, although I do believe that it's more about the idea of, all right, you're diluting the price. Their argument is, look, American beef has been depressed since COVID, for sure. COVID thinned herds. It's more expensive to run a beef farm. There's been small herds for the last 3 years for other unrelated reasons. And so now beef prices are high. Yes, bad for the consumer, but the ranchers are thrilled because they're getting made whole for what they look at as basically a half a decade where things have not been going their way. So they're just getting their coffers refilled. And now all of a sudden this Argentinian beef is going to come in and flood the market and drive prices down. Then there's all sorts of sub stuff about Brooke Rollins and how much she's in bed with whoever, blah, 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 blah. But what your point is that while this might affect the price, this is not like flooding half of America's beef supply with Argentinian beef. This is probably more biting into the specialty market of Brazilian selling than it is American sellers.
Yeah, not even that Brazilian meat is specialty market. Well, one criticism is that it gets every imported meat, even if it's lower quality, gets slapped with a USDA stable label, and then people think that means made in America. So there's some controversy about that, but it's not changing the overall import market. Like I said, Argentina is only 2%. The max it'll do is go to 4%, maybe 5%, and that's going to cut into Brazil. So like when you get down to how this might affect American farmers, the number is going to be a little bit too small to find. And if we want to actually help American farmers, this is just completely playing around the edges. Like, obviously, why are libertarians arguing for more tariffs to help farmers? We know you have to deregulate, right?
Yeah.
That's where the golden goose is. So it'd be nicer that instead of playing into these narratives, we could actually just focus on the solution and give small farmers and ranchers an ability to develop their herd and buy inputs without licensing restrictions or find different channels to the end market outside of large processor networks, because that's going to help us rapidly rebuild our herd. Also, imports are necessary for rebuilding your herd, because part of what we import is breeding stock and live cattle.
Look, we can bring nuance to a lot of this stuff. And I think that it's been very good and informative to the audience to see a different perspective on both the currency swap and this beef deal. The one thing that cannot be argued is that Trump-endorsed candidate Javier Milei is being favorably treated by the United States of America in a way that many of our closest allies, at least biggest trading partners, have gotten a sterner handling, let's say, than Javier Milei is in Argentina. From the American perspective, why?
Because, as Trump said himself, he appreciates the man's philosophy and thinks it's a good philosophy. And also, well, we can get into the tangible benefits, right? Like the peso swap was actually almost more of a favor from Argentina to us than the other way around, because Milei would have almost certainly won his election. He won 46% versus 20-something% of the opposition. It was just this narrative was built off of a Peronist victory in an urban stronghold that enabled international financial markets to kind of buck Argentina and try to compromise Milei, because they're afraid, they understand that free markets will be successful and that example will undermine international regulatory cartels. Because when you have free market competition like that, outside of it creates, what socialists call a race to the bottom. So Milei is a huge threat to the global power structure because of what he'll do with the U.S. and how the U.S. and Argentina will bounce off of each other towards being that kind of beacon on the hill. But the U.S. basically knew that the international markets, they were not making just a bet. It was like a bet combined with sabotage. And the U.S. knew Milei had a better chance of winning. So they bought pesos at rock bottom, which helped stabilize their economy a little bit, but it was more the private investment help with that as well. Anyways, after they won the election, the international markets would have had no choice but to jump back in, or they'd lose a bunch of money. So now everything's going back up. Everyone's jumping back in. So it was kind of a cheating, easy trading opportunity for the U.S. And the currency swaps already paid off. And Argentina already has a lot of pesos, so they can afford, for us to have 20 billion of them. It was for Argentina. It was like a conservative trade. It's like we could have not taken this and then gotten all the rise of the peso, or we could shore ourselves up a little bit to make sure we get, 90%.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do see that perspective of it, that Argentina didn't have to do the deal. It was looked at. I mean, obviously it was portrayed by those who didn't like it as a bailout, which I still don't know where the bailout stuff kind of came from. I guess it's just force of habit that the United States is just so.
We gave them our good currency for their crappy currency in people's minds, but obviously it was a great
But
financial
I
bet.
think it honestly, I think it's just a lifetime achievement award for the United States that we're just so used to the idea of like, we cut a check.
Right.
We're a rich country. You know, it's like palming a $20 bill in a waiter's hand or something like that. So you get a better table. We're just kind of used to that being, that being what it is. That it's like, Trump just hit him with 20 billion, just laced him with 20 bill for no reason, where it's like, no, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm more on the side of, they believe that Milei specifically is an unrepentant ally of the Trump White House in South America. There's not a ton of those. That is, he's next to Lula in Brazil. There's, it helps to have not just a friend, but like an out and out big, huge super fan friend in that region. You want to see him doing well. I do think that there was an element of hedge against market manipulation because you didn't want the peso collapsing 3 days before the election. So by dumping $20 million into it, that's not going to happen. You're hedging against that. But also, if you look at it just from an America First perspective, I mean, it's hard to say that it wasn't a good deal. Like we're up now. You can cash that out today, or you can leave it if you think that there's more room to grow. And I think that there's argument that there's more room to grow with the Argentinian peso.
I think America First has been translated to you're not allowed to talk to anybody in another country. Like you can't. Yeah. So it's kind of gotten to the extreme of that. So that made it easy narrative fodder. But it's the same thing happened with Palestine, when there was a development plan and it was all private investors and it was sold as the U.S. is going to pay for Palestine's development. All the libertarians jumped onto that. I don't want one of my dollars going to Israel. Just like when the ballroom story dropped and a bunch of the people on the left said, I don't want any of my dollars going to the ballroom, but it's all privately funded.
It's not.
So I just would request that we be a little bit more careful of doing the globalist communist bidding and falling for their agitprop around their biggest existential threats.
I really just wonder. I wonder where we are just in terms of comprehension about a lot of this stuff, because that's the thing that kind of, you come to it from a very libertarian perspective. You've got your own sectarian battles within your movement that, I've certainly made my fair share of jokes about the quickest way that you can never leave an argument is to ask a libertarian what libertarianism is. And that is essentially, a large swath of your life. But I also just wonder, like, is there anybody who's like trying actively to explain this kind of stuff, like on any kind of like news level that isn't just repeating press releases of people that want to sway an argument? Like, I understand that we've blended opinion and fact on stuff like this, but this is actually like a really interesting story. It was a really interesting bet to say like, hey, does it make sense to bet $20 billion on the Argentinian peso? And now I don't think that that's a wide story. I think that would be a story for people who care about South America. They care about Milei. They care about American financial interests, or they're into financial news in general. But it's an interesting idea to say like, oh, look, they bet $20 billion on this thing that now in hindsight looks like you just bet the money line on the biggest Super Bowl favorite of all time. And guess what? They won. And everyone's so you just made money.
Everyone's calling them losers, so can't we at least be a little curious about their spectacular victory if we were so sure that they were losers? And there's some other examples of that where why aren't we analyzing these very fascinating things like Trump finding a third way? It was because it was always, will it be Israel-Palestine or Israel or Palestine? And Trump's like, what about the third option of rich Arabs and getting them invested in the Palestinian region, right? That's really creative. It's really good empire deconstruction, which libertarians should appreciate. Another one that's even more obvious from a libertarian perspective is Trump already got rid of 15% of the federal bureaucrats. These are not like the civil servant class, like the actual federal bureaucrats that make the unaccountable regulation. It's forecast for 20% at the end of the year. So that's 350,000 already 500,000 estimated by the end of the year. That would be 20% of the federal bureaucracy. He's created executive orders saying that every regulation that violated 10 recent Supreme Court decisions on the 10th Amendment and Interstate Commerce Clause, like EPA versus West Virginia and Chevron, et cetera, he told every agency to get rid of every regulation that violated those Supreme Court decisions. Well, that would be about 90% of regulations. So you still need the staff to carry that out. And that's a very complicated, difficult process of dismantling a Jenga tower. But that's the order, right? So why aren't, and this is the only reason I would still harp on libertarians about it, is that because I need you guys. You're the ones who understand this stuff. Can you please, I would like for us to, messaging is really important, but I would like for us to focus on stuff that not only is something that he's aligned with or that he could do, but that would also make a big impact, rather than stuff that has less of an impact or that is impossible. Let's, because we can capture some of these opportunities to really kind of save the country and save millions of people from missing the boat on life.
And I'm from a libertarian adjacent, but very much on the normie side of the street perspective on this. But it was one of the most baffling things I have ever seen in my entire life, having paid attention to arguments from libertarian sources for most of my life that have largely centered around the idea of the unaccountable bureaucrat and the inability, the Sisyphusian impossibility of firing people that work in the federal government for Trump to come in and do both of them almost immediately, that some of the most high profile libertarian voices have been screeching in pain and horror as opposed to exalted joy, which I assume they would do because that's all I've been reading for the past 30 years of my life, is how excited they would be about it. And look, and I know that within the libertarian culture, there's, again, very, very hard sectarian lines. So it's not a shock to you that Reason Magazine would be screaming and bleeding about how awful it is. And this is the worst way that you could possibly gut the federal government. But I'm like, from my perspective, I'm like, you're the gut the federal government people. That's what I've read in your pages for my entire life. Why aren't you smiling and clapping and saying, ha, 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 yes, yes, yes?
Cato has an unbelievable amount of regulatory research and lobbying.
Yeah, they're another one. Cato, I have no idea what the hell is happening with Cato.
Why are you still cozying up to cocktail party Soros types when you have the opportunity to accomplish 90% of your long-term agenda? Just give up the border, for a little bit. You can get one thing done, or give it up forever. But Trump's already kind of solved that issue. Which was another thing people thought that could never be done, right? It's actually, you can't solve the border. Even a wall, even if you build an entire wall across the whole U.S. and make it 50 feet tall, you still won't solve the border. Okay, well, he did it without having to build a castle, There's zero illegal immigration now. It's crazy.
Yeah, the southern border, I think, is almost now gone to an undercovered story, considering how much it mattered. And, there was a poll that came out today. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, that demonstrated voters' preferences for each party's least popular issues. And for the Democrats, it was 5 out of the top 10 were related to the idea of the southern border, that was deeply unpopular on a few different ways, either in terms of giving illegal immigrants healthcare or citizenship or blah, 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 blah.
Wage suppression.
Now I kind of feel like it's an undercovered story, because it's wait, really? It just stopped? Now it's just over? Should
we take a second to memorialize this, Maybe make a museum about a border tunnel, like they used to exist?
Yeah, I mean,
Vietnam, where you can go in the tunnels of the Viet Cong. Can we set that up yet?
I should do a Sora video. A trend on the Sora app is just to do theme park rides of various things. I should just do the theme park ride of the underground the border tunnel that is now unused. Maybe that's a good use for it. People can do it. Take it from Tijuana, there and back.
That would be great. we'll get Elon to connect them together.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's been very interesting to kind of see from my perspective, especially in the libertarian right, where people are kind of aligned, and the idea that there are even people that list themselves as libertarian minded that are really just kind of DC people. That's, I think, one of the biggest things that I've realized that there is just, and I don't blame them. Yeah, I'm going up there to DC over the weekend, and I'm going to meet a bunch of friends, and a bunch of my friends are bummed because guess what? The media is dying and the government's dying. And those are the two jobs that make that town run. Like, it sucks if you are in one of those two industries because they're in tremendous flux right now. And I can get it from a human perspective. If like, hey, my neighbor's out of work and people are really mad and the happy hours get longer and longer because people have less time that they would be spending at work. Funny. But at the same time, if you're ideologically aligned, which we spend so much time talking about, these ideological purity tests, if one of yours is there should be a smaller federal government, well, guess what, dog? It's tiny now compared to where it was before.
I've seen some of those libertarian, I'm in some DC, like that exact type of libertarian group chat, and they're like, Trump he's firing people too recklessly. Like, my friend Jeff did something valuable. I'm like, wait a minute. You can stack up all these perceptions.
We can like Jeff. We can be sad for Jeff. It's fine. Like, it's human to be sad for your friend who lost their job. But
we don't want a million bureaucrats centrally planning the economy. Jeff can go work for the water department in Arkansas if he wants to continue his mission.
Well, but it's just hard from people that were like looking at Javier Milei with a chainsaw or the Afuera videos and then being like, no, not this way. And it's like, I don't know. This has been probably the most eye-opening year of my life in terms of understanding where, like, this has been a true shakeup in terms of political allyship. It's been a true shakeup in terms of like what happens when you really start pulling things out of the socket, in DC in a way that few people really have before. And I think for a lot of people, it does make them queasy, and I don't fault them for it. But I do fault the libertarians because this is like there's like the whole thing was let's pull all this stuff out of the walls and see what happens.
And one of the big things I think people are underestimating is how much Trump is actually doing, right? So, because it's one, you can not cover it and you can not talk about it, and then maybe your audience won't know about it. I get messages like this a lot where these libertarian accounts are like, wow, I haven't seen it. I had no idea he cut 50% of the federal workforce. I actually like that a lot. How did I not know that? Oh man, everything I've been reading is so depressing. So the longer time goes on, the more Trump's success and transformative actions are going to be revealed, and the more the results of those are going to be revealed. And so if you don't explain this to people now, they're going to be asking questions for later for why basically were we left out of this momentum and success, and why didn't we know about this? And that includes a lot of things around education, foreign policy, regulation, and a whole bunch of topics beyond the border, which is already wrapped up. And then to Trump's philosophy, right? Like, you asked me, why does he like Milei? Yeah. Well, I got the opportunity to explain the philosophy of voluntarism to Trump. I had to do it because I was trying to explain the significance of Ross Ulbricht as a martyr for our cause, which then led me to explain
this was when you and your wife were involved in the Libertarian Party, and you guys were discussing him speaking at the conference, right?
Yes, we before the election, November the year before, we met. We planned. That's where the idea to have him show up at the convention came up. And then it was like, what can you say at the convention that will make the crowd not hate you? And obviously Ross Ulbricht get the biggest cheer. He's like, so why do they care? Why do people care so much about this guy? Why this guy? Like, of all the things, I just asked you anything you want from libertarians. And I was expecting a policy, and so I explained his significance as a martyr to our cause in connection to his voluntary trade network, because our philosophy is basically that voluntary hierarchies are more functional, adaptable, and moral. And to the degree that is possible, we should maximize voluntary hierarchy. Like things should be as voluntary as, possible. And I framed it like that, whatever's like possible. And so that's a very positive, neutral framing where he's like, yeah, well, that sounds nice. It's kind of like my philosophy,
Yeah.
And of course, people freak out about that. But if you're 100% pragmatist and 100% radical, there's a lot of dependencies. We have one of the biggest governments in U.S. history. So someone has to drive that and make decisions. And that's like one of those railway track hypotheticals where it's not like the thing is running over bodies the entire time, whether you're pressing the lever or not. So it's a complicated task to deconstruct that. And he's not a philosopher like Millet, but he's understands the bureaucracy better than most political people because he's a businessman. So he understands the opportunity, and he's generally philosophically aligned, in my opinion, which to some people might feel absurd to say, but it's actually not that tough of an ideal to identify with or like. It's like, yeah, obviously things should be voluntary if it's possible.
Well, I was there the night that he gave his speech, and I've told you before that when it was first announced, I called it the biggest act of political cuckoldry I've ever seen. I have since come around on it because it gave me the opportunity to see him speak in front of the drunkest crowd.
It was one of the most amazing political events. The energy in the room, no one will ever understand.
It was insane.
It was at the very end of convention when we were all tired and went ramped up from that. And then we went straight into the Trump speech, and everybody had the strongest emotions ever. It was the most like anger, excitement. Every single emotion in the room was maxed out. Like you could
I have been
with a knife.
I've been to concerts. I've been to professional wrestling. I am a big fan of animated, screaming crowds. It is my favorite crowd to be in, and that was the closest thing I have gotten to a professional wrestling kind of vibe for anything political, let alone President Trump on what would eventually be a winning thing. But one thing that he did say during that speech, along with Ross Ulbricht, then I eventually give you guys credit for bringing him on, because if your top thing was free Ross Ulbricht, and for the price of him speaking in front of a hostile crowd, Ross Ulbricht got free. That seems like a pretty good trade to me. But one of the other things that he did say was that he would put a libertarian in the cabinet. That doesn't seem to have happened. Did you guys have a sense who he was thinking at the time and what happened to that?
So they asked us for names. They were desperate for help. We went to all the libertarian orgs. I tried to talk to different influencers. I tried to talk to different institutes. No one lifted a finger. No one was interested at all. They were like, don't talk to Trump. Or just not understanding that it was a real opportunity. But they need a lot of help staffing their admin. So there's not a lot of libertarians with the professional or like ideological or pragmatic combination to like have the correct resume. A lot of the more institutional libertarians or professional libertarians were anti-Trumpers, TDS for different reasons, and a lot of the more radical ones were not as professional. But there's a huge network of libertarians out there that could have been tapped into that's beyond just the people I know. If we were more kind of onto this opportunity and had a little more patience. But for example, there was no one that we pulled up that I think would have been better than Linda McMahon for Department of Education.
Speaking of professional wrestling.
Yeah, because she's hardcore. She's actually doing it. She's trying to get rid of the Department of Ed. She's a libertarian. The whole wrestling world is libertarian. Okay, I'm sorry she's not doesn't have Rothbard in her profile picture. I don't know if it still counts. But she's getting rid of her entire department, and she's a libertarian. So the pick that was slotted for libertarian was the Department of Ed. And the idea was that it be destroyed. So if someone's destroying the Department of Ed, then that's the
You
libertarian.
would want
there.
somebody
And she's
that would
also
know how
actually
to do it
libertarian.
limb by limb because they have spent a lot of time complaining about it. And few people on earth have complained about the Department of Education more than libertarians.
Right. So that was that one. That's covered. Also, I consider the whole Doge thing, which is continuing, by the way. That was another agitprop libertarians fell for, which is we just talked about the Doge not cutting spending. Okay, Doge was never about spending. Elon also knows this. It was about cutting regulations. And that's where the big opportunity is. Now, he could have had possibly frustrations about the success of that.
Elon might have gotten over his skis with his 2 billion talk, or aim for 2 billion, cut a billion when it's
that might be part of it too.
Yeah.
And he got maybe too ambitious on that, but there's still a huge opportunity within the regulatory structure. Cause we've talked about this before, right? Medical spending is 25% of the federal budget. You can easily cut that in half with deregulation if you actually go for it. And that's a 13% reduction in the federal budget. You could never get that out of Congress. If he used all his leverage towards Congress, maybe he'd get 1%, maybe not.
Yeah.
And it would be useless. So that's where the big opportunities are, because they also free people, right? Freeing the education, freeing the market. Now we're free to learn skills. We're unconstrained in our application of those skills. Those are the kind of things we need to increase to be able to get rid of the dependencies. Just like Malay, right? Versus just leaning on austerity first. You have to earn your cuts, which is what I said to Trump. You deregulate, pull the slack, and then you have, you can be able to tackle the spending eventually, which is kind of impossible right now. Like this was my pitch to Trump, independent of what he did. So when he did this plan, when he was receptive to that, and when he was like, yeah, that's like aligned, I was very excited. I was like, wow, Trump is pushing things in a libertarian direction. We're good. But I thought that was the harder question for me. I thought that it would be easy to get the libertarians on board with the Javier Milei loving deregulation guy. But that was actually the part that was harder. They joined with Nick Fuentes or Reason instead. So that was a little bit surprising. But like I said, the time will reveal some of these results, and then hopefully libertarians can get a little more white-pilled and help maximize the opportunity within what we're already in line with.
One last thing here out the door. We mentioned that this came as part as you and your wife's involvement in the Libertarian Party. You guys are both no longer involved in the party, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Okay.
Angela's the chair of the Mises Caucus.
Okay.
So she's organizing all of that. And we're doing a kingmaker strategy. So we want to take the leverage to accomplish something huge. And the thing that is going to make the most impact, so like combining leverage and loose rocks. What's the biggest, loosest rock that we can take our crowbar under and really change the country? So we still understand the value of third party as leverage. And we want to be fixers instead of spoilers. Rather
so your philosophy then is more like the RFK philosophy of be viable, with the idea being, hey, if you agree to do this thing that we believe is really, really important, then we are open to endorsing.
Yeah, and this is not a new idea. This is how third parties typically operated in the U.S., especially until they basically added too many ballot access restrictions to make this possible, which is that's why prohibition got passed. I mean, it's not the greatest example because it's a terrible policy, but they started an independent prohibition party, and it got up to 10%. Everybody who really was into that, meant a lot to them. And then one of the parties adopted that so that they would get that 10%, and then they won, and then they passed abortion. I mean, not abortion, prohibition. Abortion, you could probably start an abortion party too these days, since it was the top Democratic issue. I think the last Democrat issue. But and that's what we can do as a Libertarian Party, because it's an idea that relates to a lot of issues. Because those parties would get their issue adopted, and then they would dissolve. Where we have a unique position where we hold the ballot access, and we're also in a broader idea set that relates to many different issues. So it's like we can, it's like a revolver with 6 shots instead of a musket with gunpowder. And then it also makes you more serious players, because Reform didn't pop up as a major party in the UK until Farage got Brexit through, right? He used his leverage, he got Brexit through, and then he's like, okay, cool. And then the establishment failed to deliver on that, which then created the mandate for Reform to take over as so like, it's not this idea of, people have this idea that it's being co-opted, or you're, like killing the party or something. It's like, no, actually having a victory makes people more interested in what you're doing. You're like, oh, this can actually be applied usefully. And if nobody gets the value from Ross or just our conversation, then everybody should understand it from RFK. Okay. He's in charge of the largest government agency in human history that touches, probably 40% of the entire economy. So, like, not insignificant.
I mean, that was the deal he made. He dropped out at a time that mattered, and now he is where he is. It is hard to argue, at least with the Trumps, that was a deal to be made, that was to be honored. Well, it's very, very interesting. I thought you guys, for whatever reason, had kind of separated yourself from that world, but it's curious. I'm very curious to see where you go, because boy, that world is. That world is animated. That Libertarian Party world. You guys are certainly built from sturdier stock to want to head back in there and keep working on it. But it is certainly a commitment to cause.
Yeah, well, it's important, and I'll never give up on the Libertarians, because there's not a lot of people who understand Austrian economics, so we need those people to staff the federal bureaucracy. We need those people in the government. And there's tons of opportunities for that. Like, people don't understand. It's actually already largely the case. There's a lot of libertarians in there. And because we talked about just the top level cabinet positions. Yes. There's a lot of positions to fill. And so that's why there's a huge opportunity with the Trump campaign. And that will continue to be the case going forward. And they got delayed on appointments. They got delayed on with the budget fights, which delayed cabinet appointments further. And then now they're getting delayed by the shutdown in terms of new hires. But the first part was clear out a bunch, get the leadership changed, and then fill out that rank and file to actually carry out Trump's executive orders.
Well, we will continue to follow it along, and I hope that you are on soon again so we can talk about it. Austin Padgett, co-host of the History 102 podcast. And where do people find you on Twitter?
Ludwig Never Mises. The first E and never is missing. But yeah, Ludwig Never Mises, Austin Padgett. Type in those words together and you should find it. And then History 102, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you like to listen. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Austin. See you, Justin. Pleasure. Politics is hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. You can send me an email, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find, follow, and share video clips of the show. Justin R. Young on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on X, and get all of our content, including the full episode of the video version of this show on YouTube. Politics is the channel there. Hit me with a one-time donation. Especially, hey, look, you want me to buy a few rounds at the tune-in? Saturday night, 8 p.m.? Well, hit me up with a one-time donation. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash. You can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. The only place to get our bonus content is TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week, either $3 a week or $99 for the entire year. That's 150 episodes of PX3 for under $100, but it is only our foundational tier that gets their name read each and every episode on our big feed. Sonny Black, L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes. Oh yeah, it's Adam. Neil, AB Puppy,
Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Checkers, Gloria, my mom, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, Steven, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the podcast. Only place to go is take politics seriously. Sign up at the foundational tier. Do. Gabe Fleischer, the Wunderkind, back on the show this Friday. I can't wait to talk Shutdown with him. But that's Friday. Till then, this is your old friend Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.